Hey, what's up guys? This is Alex Campbell with another video, and this is basically going to be just kind of a follow-up to a previous video that I made about my time in Greece and just some of the tips that I had when it came to traveling out of the country, especially as myself. I was a first-time traveler when it came to I'm a first-time international traveler, at least. Going back to the previous video, which was a pretty long video. It was a long video. And the video ended up being about 30 plus minutes long. So I understand that that's kind of like, but that video was a lot more detailed. It kind of talked about all the technical side of the trip. And, it was just kind of some of my advice, some of my opinions on what you should or shouldn't do, especially when it came to Greece. Going there for the first time. But the first thing when it comes to that trip, and I said this in the last video, if you see it, if you don't, I'm gonna say this tip again. And as far as when it comes to doing any form of international traveling, when it comes to doing any type of traveling, if you've never been on an airplane before, if this is your first time flying, or at least your first time flying out the country, my first advice would be just to try it. That was pretty much like the best advice I would give, just as far as right out the gate, is to just try it. If it's for you, it's for you. If it's not, it's not. But at least you can confidently say that you tried something that maybe not your cup of tea, or something that you're interested in, but you're very nervous about. At the very least, just try it. It doesn't have to be some grand, it doesn't have to be a long trip. It doesn't have to be too far, but at least get the feel of it so you can kind of make that decision going forward. So the next advice I'll probably give is to understand your travel situation and your travel arrangements. Unlike other countries, Greece is a really interesting country because it's made up of a bunch of islands. And so going through all the different islands, you learn that your ways of transportation are a little bit different compared to other places that you might know, especially in the country, especially in the United States, depending on where you live at. And so when I was over in Greece, you need to really understand your transportation options, because if you're in Athens, or like you're in the mainland, you have trains, you have your taxis, your buses, the subway system, etc. But once you get to the island, there's a couple ways you can get to and from the island. You can hop on a plane. I wouldn't recommend that. The other method is, and this is the one I took the entire time I was there, is I would get on what's called a ferry. Over there, they got a couple of ferries. They got a couple of different brands that I went on. And what these ferries basically do is you basically just they're almost like cruise lines. They're more like cruise ship, like smaller versions of a cruise ship than actual ferries. And I'm pretty sure they got some smaller ones that you could take. But the ferries, what they do is they go throughout the islands, and they basically kind of like, they might start at kind of like at the Athens port, and then they'll just go from island to island to island to island. And you basically just get off at the island that you're trying to go to. And one of the big reasons why I bring this up about understanding your transportation options is, unlike, especially with the ferry, I went there during down season. There's a lot of times you can go to Greece, a lot of people go there during the summertime, springtime, but I went during down season. I went near the winter time. And so when I went, and really, well, it was more about the fall time, but when I went, the ferry only came but so often. And so what ended up happening is that the ferry wasn't running every day. And so, funny story, I actually had to stay at an extra island just because that was the only island that was gonna have a ferry that was gonna go from there to basically my next destination that I wanted to go to. And there wasn't going to be another ferry for like another week. I had to stay at another island for just one day, just because that was kind of the only island that was going to be available. And if I didn't do this, if I had not looked this up beforehand, I probably would have been stuck at the island that I was at previously. And so when it comes to transportation, man, you really need to understand your transportation options over there in Greece. To piggyback on the transportation thing, also, if you are going to be going and traveling outside of Athens to the islands, you need to understand the transportation options once you're actually on the island. The islands, you know, especially when it came to taxis, and I found this out when I got there, and thankfully some of the locals basically told me this. There's only but so many taxis on certain islands. And I can't remember which island it was specifically, but one of the islands only had, if I remember correctly, they told me that it only had like 20 taxis. What happens now is if you get in a situation where you need a taxi, you know, depending on where you're at, which island you're at, in that wherever specific time, you might not have any available. Let's see. The next thing I would say, I didn't realize how much you needed cash when it came to moving in the country. Here in the United States, you know, credit card and debit cards, that's kind of the way that we spend money here. You know, it's very rare that, you know, it's very rare for people to just carry around a lot of cash nowadays, especially in the US. But I didn't realize when you got to that country, man, a lot of deals get made just by the fact that you have cash. And on top of that, there's a lot of things that you can't do, or they're just not going to accept unless you have cash. When I was trying to leave Athens to go down to the port, I had a ferry that was going to be leaving in like 20, 30 minutes. I already had bought my ticket online, and I get down to the ferry, and, you know, the taxi driver tells me, you know, how much it's going to cost. And I said, okay, do you take card? And he said no. And I didn't have any cash on me. So what he ended up doing is, and I said this in a previous video, but what he ended up doing is he ended up locking my luggage in the trunk and wouldn't open it until I brought him cash. You know, so, you know, at that point, you know, I had to go, like, basically I had to go into the city, you know, cut some corners. I had to find an ATM basically. And then once I got that money, I had to run back to the taxi driver just to get the bags out of the trunk, just so I didn't miss my ferry. That was also about to leave in like 15 minutes. You know, cash is something that you really do want to make sure you have enough of once you get to the island. You know, and the cash came in handy when it came to like the shops, the stores. You know, not every place accepted card. I mean, that's even here in this country. But, you know, a lot of the places, you know, the prices changed if you had cash, if you know what I mean. It came in handy to have a little bit of cash on you, you know, and I advise you to have at least something. As soon as you get off the plane at the airport, I would go ahead and just go to that ATM, get a little bit of cash out, and then, you know, that should take you for, you know, as long as you need, you know, just take out what you need. You don't need to have a lot of money, but you need to have a good couple $100s worth of whatever currency that you're at in whatever location. But especially over in Greece, you want to have at least 200-300 euros. And I think that will help you when it comes to taxis, subway, and just transportation in general. Also, to kind of add on to, now I'm thinking about the whole cash thing and the whole money thing, you want to make sure, and this is something that it didn't even cross my mind till I got there, you want to make sure that you call your bank in advance and tell them that you're going out the country. Because what can happen is once you get to that country, you know, you might accidentally get your card frozen because you didn't let them know. So what ended up happening to me is, you know, when I first left the country, my first layover flight was in Amsterdam. You know, I went from Florida to Atlanta, and then from Atlanta to Amsterdam. And that was my first layover flight. And so when I got there, you know, I was in a gift shop. I went to go purchase something, and I swiped my card and it declined. And when it declined, I'm just like, you know, like, why would it, you know, because again, I just, you know, obviously I'm going out the country. Obviously I took the time to go and make sure that I got sufficient funds in my account. So why would it decline? Basically what happened was, once I got to kind of a location where I had internet, I called my bank, and come to find out, they had frozen my account because they thought somebody had hacked it. When you see, you know, I understand it. You know, you at first you see a purchase made in Atlanta, and then all of a sudden you see a purchase in Amsterdam. That kind of makes sense. I get it. It makes sense that might happen. So I wasn't even upset about it, but what they had to do is they had to basically put like a travel alert, or like a travel, or I guess it's like a travel notice, but it basically lets them know that you're out the country. It lets them know that you're going to be making purchases on that card for whatever extended period of time that you're going to be in that country. And so that's one of my first advice. That's an advice I would give about finances before you ever make that trip, is call your bank and let them know, I am going out the country to this location. I'm going to be there for this amount of time. You ain't got to tell them all the detail, but just let them kind of know that this is where I'm going to be at. So when you get there, you don't try to make a purchase and then your card declines, because the last place you want to be is out the country with no money. Let's see, with that, that's pretty much the end of the video. That kind of sums up, or not sums up, but it kind of just speaks on just, some of my opinions, some tips, as far as going to Greece, especially if this is your first time going to Greece, and then just some of my experiences. But with that, that's pretty much the end. And with that, I'll see y'all next time. Peace.